Thank you so much for your patience while we got all of our panelists online. We're all navigating this new virtual world. I want to begin this webinar today. Again, my name is Jennifer DeCarli. I'm an Assistant Commissioner at the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. I'll be the moderator for this event. I've just heard that I'm frozen. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. So to begin today, we are really thrilled to be here with such prestigious leaders. Okay, can you hear me now? No?
I can hear you. I don't know if anybody else can.
Yes, okay. So we're going to get started today. We're going to get started today by jumping into our presentation to talk about this very important topic. We won't be taking questions today because we have so much information to get through, but we do have a chat feature up, and I'll be monitoring that chat feature and asking our presenters to answer some of those questions as we go along. We will be providing contact information for all of the speakers for listeners to be able to reach out to them at the end of this event. To get us started today, we are going to be hearing from very important leaders in our community in Queens. First, we'll be hearing from my commissioner, Cecile Noel. After Commissioner speaks, we'll be hearing from DA Katz. And after that, we'll be hearing from our Borough President, Sharon Lee. So with that, I'm going to have the Commissioner Cecile Noel open our webinar. Commissioner?
Good morning. Good
Commissioner,
morning.
can you hear us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You can hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
go ahead.
Okay, excellent. All right, great. Good morning. I would like to begin by thanking Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz and Queens Borough President Sharon Lee for spending time with us today. We are honored you could join today's event. I would also like to thank our panelists, Kelly Sessoms-Newton, Domestic Violence Bureau Chief of the Queens District Attorney's Office, Maureen Katz, the Vice President of Criminal Justice with Safe Horizon, and Margarita Guzman, the Executive Director of the Violence Intervention Program, Mujeres. And to my staff, thank you, Jennifer DeCarli, for moderating, and thank you, Susan Jacobs, Executive Director of our Queens Family Justice Center. I'm thrilled our guests and panelists have come together to lend their expertise. We are very fortunate to be able to collaborate with one another on a daily basis to provide much needed information for survivors. I would also like to give a special thanks to the many who've joined us here today, our guests. I hope we can provide you with information and resources which brought you here to this town hall. And I would like to point out that the town halls like these are virtual and are virtual and are also vital in our efforts to help survivors, especially during this time of social distancing. We all know the many effects of social distancing, including how it can create a sense of isolation. We also know that for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, home may not be a safe place. It is my hope that today's town hall will help survivors know that they are not alone. As the Commissioner for the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, I cannot stress enough that survivors need us now more than ever during these extraordinary times. Our top priority remains to ensure continuity of services and unwavering support. And our family justice centers continue to provide critical crisis support and advocacy by connecting survivors to immediate safety planning, shelter assistance, legal consultation, and more. COVID-19 puts into sharp focus the vulnerabilities that many people in our community and city face every day, especially gender-based violence survivors. This public health crisis highlights the barriers and challenges that we know keep people from seeking help and finding safety. The city is here for survivors during this crisis and beyond, and we will continue to do all that we can to identify best practices and innovative approaches to enhance our services for survivors. We must continue to work together to find creative and unique and impactful ways to help survivors during these increasingly challenging times. So I want to encourage all of you to be upstanders, to be the difference in the lives of survivors by offering them support. And today's panel will give you some simple and helpful ways to do that. We need sustained collaboration, and we need your compassion to continue to tell survivors they are not alone and that help is available for them. And please do not forget to be kind to yourself and to practice self-care. If you are experiencing stress or feeling anxious, please reach out for help. You can find support through NYC Well by calling 1-888-NYC-WELL or texting WELL to 65173. In closing, please remember, we have strength in numbers. Together, we will get to the other side of this health crisis. And together, we will help put an end to domestic and gender-based violence. I wish you good health, and please have a wonderful day. And now I turn it back over to Jennifer DeCarli.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Noel, for starting our webinar today and for those important remarks. At this point, I'm honored to present our Queens District Attorney, Melinda Katz, and thank her for taking time out of her busy schedule to join us today and give us some introductory remarks.
It is my pleasure to be here, and I want to thank all of you that are on this call that continue to fight the fight every single day. I do want to thank, Kelly from my office who works on TV. I want to thank Safe Horizons, Maureen, for the work that you guys do. We love the collaboration that we have and the partnership, and we appreciate it every single day. To Margarita Guzman, Violence Intervention Program services are so needed now more than ever. To Susan Jacobs of the Mayor's Office, thank you for the work that you're doing, and to you, Commissioner. And I want to note our great Borough President, Sharon, who is on the phone, Sharon Lee, who took over the office for a month, then 3 months, now a year, and doing an amazing job at getting resources out and making sure people know they have the Borough Presidency to still go to. So here at the DA's office, we are finding that domestic violence is being underreported at the moment. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, some of it's just intuitive, right? People are stuck in their homes. We have trouble contacting them by telephone. We are worried clearly about emailing victims of domestic violence directly when they are stuck in their homes and not able to go outside. I mean, we're always a little worried about it, but right now we're extremely concerned about it. And we need to make sure that we do have a way of communicating, whether that's sending out a general email with a bunch of services listed and making sure that DV is on top and all the rest are underneath, but we make sure that we clearly send them to our past victims of domestic violence, whether or not that's trying to call in some way just to be able to check on them, but making sure that we're not emailing or texting for people in danger while they are stuck in a home. We clearly note the fact that people can't just walk into the Family Justice Center or any other not-for-profit right now, and not necessarily because they won't find anybody, but because there's no excuse to be out. We found one case that came through here where the fight started because the wife or girlfriend was out too long, right? What are you doing out too long? All the stores are closed. Where could you possibly have been? That type of thing. So we are clearly and acutely aware of the fact that the freedom, whatever little folks feel they have, of getting out, going to a job, and then going for help is not there. We have instituted a hotline trying to use my list of 20,000 people or whatever it is that we have, and sending out a hotline, 718-286-4410. 4410. It is a 24/7 hotline. Someone will answer the phone. They can either speak to an ADA or we give them information on how to connect with Safe Horizons. And, you know, it's a way for me, clearly, as an elected official, that people know to some extent, good or bad, but it's a way for people to know that I am saying you can call for help. Calling for help doesn't mean that we're automatically going to disrupt your life, come in, do anything that you don't want us to do, but that if you need services, we'll connect you with them, and if you want to speak to an ABA, we'll connect you with that person. We also clearly say in the phone, in the hotline, if it's an emergency, hang up, dial 911, and then call us back when, you know, we can help you with everything else that you need. So we are aware of also the fact that the police and, you know, the services available are limited. There's no home visits. Some of our complaints, and a large portion of our complaints in the past come from home visits, right? You walk into the house, you see what's going on, you speak to the children, you see if there's anything out of place. You know, there's eye contact, you know, with the victim to be able to see whether they're trying to say something and can't. I know that sounds a little odd, but it's just the truth. They send signals and somehow you miss them if it's a phone call. So we are doing everything we can from a legal basis. But I am concerned the fact that the reports, I don't believe, are coming in. I think that it's happening, but you have no way of reporting it. And so we're trying everything we can to reach our past victims and to make sure that victims today know that there are other answers besides maybe your abuser coming out, going to a COVID-lined shelter, and that you have shelters that you can go to as a victim, and we will protect you from the virus as well. And I thank everyone for being here today, all of the participants who I know called in. It's an important topic, and we have an amazing, amazing group of people that are heading this up in the city that are here today, so thank you.
Thank you so much, DA Katz. Thank you again for your commitment to this issue and for partnering with us on today's event and for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your commitment and all of those wonderful resources that your office has created and has used it to make sure that survivors feel safe and supported during this time. So thank you very, very much. We will, so that everyone knows who's listening, we will make sure that the numbers that DA Katz talked about and her hotline numbers are posted on our website and provided at the end, and we'll also put it in the chat function as well. So thank you again, DA Katz. At this time, I want to just remind all the panelists that I'll be moderating, obviously, today's event, introducing you when you're about to speak, and that everyone is in gallery view right now. And so just be mindful of that. And I will now turn it over to our next very important leader in the community, our Borough President, Sharon Lee, to continue with our introductory remarks. Borough President, I turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor for me to join you in this very important town hall. We hope this is not the last. I'm sure this is not the last, especially in this time of COVID. Thank you to everyone for all that you do, everyone who is tuning in, whether here in the webinar or online. And just a reminder to folks, we are streaming live on our website, www.queensbp.org, right on our homepage, so that there's no telltale URLs in your web browser history, www.queensbp.org. You know, we here in Queens, we know that DV and sexual assault rob the survivor and entire families, entire communities of agency and of being whole. We here in Queens know that DV and sexual assault cause intergenerational trauma. And breaking that cycle of intergenerational trauma requires collective strength and commitment and investment made by all the people here on this panel, as well as many of the providers and advocates who are tuning in online and here in the webinar. We here in Queens know that DV and sexual assault is about power and an imbalance of power. And until it is fully eradicated, we will always fall short of full equality. And we here in Queens know that DV and sexual assault thrive on silence and on silent struggles. And we fight it by breaking that silence, even in a pandemic, And so to everyone who is tuning in here in the webinar or online, or who may be watching the recording after May 14, know this. In Queens, social distancing and social isolation does not mean that help is not ready and available. Help is ready and available. Number two, know that you are not alone. You are not alone. And if your options are limited and you are trapped with abuse at home, with the stay-at-home order and other parameters, if you feel trapped, know this. We know you are here. We know you're there. And when you are ready, essential services here in Queens County remain live and ready today and tomorrow to assist you. Just call or reach help online, phone, email, any way that you are most comfortable. But it is when you are ready. And with that, thank you. And I'm sorry, Jennifer, if I may, just a moment. I just want to take a moment to thank my team at Queensborough Hall. I know that we've got a full team who are online here and helping with some of the technical aspects of this webinar. And in particular, I want to thank Brent Weitzberg, my Director of Health and Human Services, Anayeli Gomez-Bertain, my Policy Advisor, Carolina Gill, who is our Zoom extraordinaire, but also my Fiscal Officer, Chris Barca, and Manuel Rodriguez, and of course, my Chief of Staff, Vicky Morales-Casella. And so thank you, and we are here to assist everyone here on this panel. Thanks for having this.
Great. Thank you so much, Borough President. We really appreciate those remarks, especially your emphasis that no one is alone. And that's why we wanted to do this webinar today in partnership with your office, who has done a wonderful job. So thank you. I give them a huge shout out as well as the District Attorney's Office. We are really proud to partner with all of you. So we really are thrilled that we had these three and very important leaders in our community kick off our webinar to give us those introductory remarks and really set the stage for how important of an issue this is. And at this point, we're going to be hearing from experts in the community who are on the ground in Queens, providing really important services and programs for Queens residents through their not-for-profits or through their government agencies. So first, we'll be hearing from Kelly Sessoms-Newton, who is the Bureau Chief at the Queens District Attorney's Office at the Domestic Violence Bureau. Kelly is going to be talking about her Bureau's response and the criminal justice response to domestic violence during this time. Kelly, I turn it over to you.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Hi, good morning. Once again, my name is Kelly Sessoms, and I'm the Bureau Chief of the Domestic Violence Bureau here at the Queens County District Attorney's Office under the leadership of District Attorney Melinda Katz. The DV Bureau oversees the prosecution of the approximately 6,000 intimate partner violence cases that happen in Queens County every year. So think about that, 6,000 times a year, just in Queens County, just in this one borough, someone is harmed, victimized, hurt by someone they love, whether it be their spouse, or whether it be someone with whom they reside, or someone with whom they have children. And those are just the ones that actually report it. This is not even considering those who may be suffering domestic violence in silence, as many DV victims do. Now, this forum is kind of important because now that we are all sheltering in place, as DA Katz had mentioned, and are practicing social distancing protocols, the mechanisms a person that might traditionally use to get help may not appear as available to a DV victim. For example, if you didn't want to call 911 in front of your abuser, you could leave your house and maybe walk to the local precinct and make that report. Or maybe when you went to work, you could confide in a coworker that you were in a crisis and needed help. Or perhaps when you went to your house of worship or a family gathering, you could tell someone there to help you and that you needed assistance, and you would get that help. Or if you were fortunate enough to have someone in your life who cared about you and you saw them on a regular basis and they saw you in crises, even if you didn't say anything, if I walked into my mother's house with a black eye, she would ask questions. She would want to know what happened. She would advocate on my behalf. And so that because we are practicing social distancing and we're not interacting with those that we would normally interact with, there may not appear to be mechanisms in place to a domestic violence victim where they could make that outcry and call for help if they needed help. Well, by the end of this webinar, hopefully those who are watching and the community-based organizations that are participating will be able to convey to all of you that, as everyone has been saying, we are all still here. The same people that you could go to for help before the pandemic are the same people you could go to help now. We have to be a little bit more creative on how we connect with you and interact with you, but all of us are still here. We're all functioning, we're all working, we're all available. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will see the creative ways that we are trying to connect with you, those of you who want advocacy and help in our communities. In that regard, one of the things DA Katz mentioned a moment ago, DA Katz realizes that during these times that it is important for ADAs to be available and accessible to the community, particularly when it comes to victims of domestic violence. So she has set up this 24-hour domestic violence helpline so that 24 hours a day, you could speak to a domestic violence ADA. So let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're hesitant to maybe to get law enforcement involved, but you want to know a little bit more about the process and well, what's going to happen if I call the police, what is actually going to happen? Well, you could pick up the phone, you can dial the number 718-286-4410, and you will speak to a live person on call, a live, or not a recording, but a live DA. Or let's say you already have a case pending here at the Queens County District Attorney's Office, and you misplaced a copy of your order of protection, something as simple as that. And you just feel more secure having that order of protection on you. You can call the District Attorney's DV helpline, and you can speak to a live ADA who can get that order of protection to you. Or maybe you don't want to speak to an ADA. Maybe you just want somebody to direct you somewhere, where you can get services or a shelter or safety planning or lock changes. You could also call that number and we could direct you to someone who could provide you with those services. So that's one of the ways that we are thinking outside of the box here at the DA's office and how we can connect with you during this pandemic and how we are making ourselves accessible. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is something that we have here that is unique at the Queens County DA's office, and that's the Domestic Violence Strategic Threat Alert Team. Now, it's a big title. We call it DV-STAT for short, and it is a program that is unique to the Queens County DA's office. And what is unique about this program is that in cases where someone has made a domestic violence related police report, so when they make the report, but before the defendant has been apprehended, we get that report. And normally we would not get that until after someone's been arrested and processed and gone through the court system. But the benefit of getting these reports early, first of all, there's a window there where a domestic violence victim may be most in need of outreach, maybe lock change, other services, safety planning, and we can convey them to that services who can give them that support. But also, just from a prosecutor standpoint, it is also the best time to gather and preserve any evidence that might be used to enhance that case later on. If there's someone who's working on the case before we actually have the case, there's a way to preserve photographs of the incident. There's ways to preserve any video surveillance if the incident happened outside in the open, if there are any threatening phone messages, Facebook messages. So if we do the DV-STAT program, one of the things we are able to do is to preserve any evidence that could potentially be used later on if the person who has victimized you is actually apprehended. So that's one of the ways that we are reaching out to DV victims. But more importantly, through the DV-STAT program, someone is early on making you, the victim, aware of services that may be available to you before anyone is ever prosecuted, before there's ever a case that comes into my office or lands on my desk. The other thing you should know is that the DV-STAT program and the DA's office in general, we're up and functioning. All the ADAs in the DV Bureau are working. Most of us are working remotely. The same phone numbers you had for them previously are the same phone numbers you can use now. They all have access to their case files. And again, thanks to Melinda Katz, you now can reach us 24 hours a day. So you actually have greater access to us now than you might have even had prior to the pandemic. There's something else I want to touch upon, and this has less to do with the pandemic and why people may not be able to reach out for help, and more to do with why people may not be willing. And I just want to touch on two areas here. And that has to do, I think, potentially with perceptions of law enforcement, perceptions of prosecutors, perceptions of what could happen. And let me just try to, I guess, ease the minds of those of you who might be thinking about, who are able to reach out but may not be willing at this point to reach out. Let me tell you what I do and don't do as a prosecutor. What I don't do, I don't just lock people up and throw away the key. That's not what I do. That's not my goal. That's never been my goal. Whenever I get a domestic violence case, my goals are twofold. One, some measure of accountability for the domestic abuser, and two, some measure of safety for the domestic violence survivor/victim. And how we achieve those goals can vary, but I can tell you that in the overwhelming majority of DV cases that we prosecute, they are resolved with something called an alternative to incarceration for the defendant, an alternative to incarceration. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you're a victim of domestic violence, and the thing that is triggering the domestic abuse in your home is that the defendant has an alcohol problem. He has a drinking problem. Then alcohol treatment for the defendant might be a viable resolution on that case. So alcohol treatment, that is an alternative to incarceration. Let's say the thing that is triggering the incidents in your home is that the defendant maybe has some own trauma of their own that's led to some mental health issues on the part of the defendant. Well, mental health treatment might be a viable resolution to that case. Mental health treatment is an alternative to incarceration. And there are many different programs that we offer defendants in lieu of jail, that if the defendant is truly willing to accept responsibility for their abusive conduct, they're willing to be held accountable, the overwhelming majority of them will have the opportunity to receive a non-incarceratory, a non-jail resolution to their case. So if one of the concerns you have that's keeping one from maybe reporting the situation they're in, it's like, well, he's automatically going to go to jail, or she's automatically going to go to jail. I just want to put your mind at ease, because the overwhelming majority of our cases result in some sort of alternative to that. The other thing, safety of survivors. Now, the other consideration I have when looking at any domestic violence case is, will the manner in which I resolve this case keep the victim and the community safe? Well, that's one of the reasons why we do early outreach through the DV STAT program. And that's another reason why we have such a close working relationship with the service providers like Susan at the Family Justice Center, Maureen at Safe Horizons, so that we can actually direct our victims of domestic violence to services that they may need so that they can be safe in their homes and they can be safe in their communities. So the collaboration between my office and my bureau and the other service providers is something that we actually value and we've had for many, many years, and we will continue to have for many, many years. Last thing I want to bring up, another thing that might have a bearing on whether a domestic violence victim, is not that they're not able to make a report, but maybe not be willing to make a report. And that has to do with concern or fear about their personal situation. So let me just put your mind at ease with this regard. From the perspective of someone who sees so many of these cases and so many victims of domestic violence in this community, it does not matter to me as a prosecutor who you are. It does not matter to me what your background is. You know, if you came from my community in Far Rockaway, or if you came from a community in another country, it does not matter to me. If English is your first language, or if it's not your first language, it does not matter to me. If you yourself, as a domestic violence victim, have had run-ins with the law, but yet in this case, you're the victim of domestic violence, that does not matter. It does not matter to me. Whether you're documented, undocumented, might be documented, never will be documented, it does not matter to me. You know, no matter who you are, no one deserves to be hurt by someone they love, someone who they chose to be in a relationship with. So if you make that call and your case comes across my desk, I will treat that case with the respect it deserves. I will treat it with the seriousness it deserves, and I will always do my best to do what's right and what is just on that case. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. First off, thank you so much for your partnership with our office and with the Queens Family Justice Center. We're so appreciative of it. And thank you for your commitment to being there for the Queens community and for survivors, and talking specifically about those barriers that sometimes make it more challenging for a survivor to think about engaging with the criminal justice system. Before we move on to our next panelist, we did have one question, Kelly, come up in the chat a bit about, if you could talk a bit about orders of protection right now. They have been extended per administrative order, maybe just talking about that right now and how that, what that means on the ground for survivors, and whether or not, if there's a violations of those orders, how your office is handling that.
Okay. So, so as everyone knows, we've been administratively adjourning many of these cases. Well, there's a good and a bad. So for the cases that are where the individual is arraigned in criminal court, those orders, when they're issued, are usually at least 6 months long to a year long. So, and the defendant is present when those orders are issued. So there's not the same issue with a notice requirement in those cases, because they are informed at that time that the order is issued. They are informed as to the conditions of those orders. They're informed that they can't have contact with the victim. So those are the ones that are not so problematic as far as if there's a violation of the order, proving that the defendant in fact had knowledge that the order has been issued. So there's another level of orders of protection, and those are the orders of protection where they expired sort of in that in-between stage when we were when we were under the quarantine. And so the orders were extended in the defendant's absence, but what has been done, those orders are mailed by the Office of Court Administration to the defendants. So what we would end up doing, if there's an order issued by the court, at trial, we would have to establish that that defendant did in fact have notice of that order or did receive that order in the mail. So it would really be a proof issue, but it should not in any event prevent an officer, if there is a violation of a validly issued court order of protection, from keeping an officer from making arrests. The proof issue is something that I would have to worry about from a prosecutor standpoint. It should not be something that the officer would have to worry about, as long as it was validly issued by the court. I hope I answered the questions.
You definitely did. Thank you so much, Kelly, for answering that question. And I think the real key takeaway for people listening is that if there was an order of protection that expired during the time that we've been on pause in New York State, those orders have been administratively extended. And if there has been a violation, you correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, people should be, if they want to make that report, they can make that report, and it would be up to Kelly and her office to try to prove the notice part.
That's correct. That's it.
Okay. I just want to make sure people, know that, because I think that's a really important part for survivors to know, and service providers who are helping survivors in Queens. So thank you, Kelly. Next up, I am going to introduce Susan Jacob. Susan works with me at the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, and she is the Executive Director at the Queens Family Justice Center. And Susan's going to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about the Queens FJC and how it works in partnership with the DA's offices and all of our community-based organizations to support survivors in Queens. Susan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you so much for everyone who is here in this virtual space. This is really great that we're all here to learn about resources so we can spread the word to our communities that help is out there. So for Family Justice Center, we are open in all 5 boroughs. Even though our offices are closed, we are definitely working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're answering all live calls. We're available from Monday through Friday. And we're working with community-based organizations and partner agencies to provide vital services, including legal consultation, whether it's housing, matrimonial, family law, or immigration, counseling sessions, safety planning, case management sessions, and of course more, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And we're also going to be, I know that the numbers are also going to be posted afterwards, but our mainline number is 718-575-4545. So the Family Justice Center, it is a one-stop shop essentially for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, which can include sexual violence, human trafficking, stalking, and intimate partner violence. And all services are free and confidential. And also I think Queens, many of us who work in Queens, who live in Queens, it's such an amazing borough. Huge diversity and so forth. And the Queens Family Justice Center is such a great representation of that. We have about 74% of our clients are foreign born. And we have clients who were born in 75 different countries. And on site, we have various different we have 23 partner agencies directly on site, all who you'll be hearing from, including Safe Horizon, the DA's office, Kelly and I, we work together all day long, all the time. And of course, VIP, they're all remarkable partners at the Family Justice Center. And we'll talk a little bit more about the collaboration at the FJC. And one of the things that we do is we also have NYPD on site. We have nonprofit agencies, we have human resource administration. So we have a whole array of services directly at our center. And also I want to talk a little bit about the unique programs that we have, especially right now. One of them is Cornell Tech. First of all, I am so clueless. I barely wanted to let go of my flip phone not so long ago until I was forced to do so. So fortunately, we have experts who are, when it comes to technology. So we have Cornell Tech. Many times victims come to us all the time and say, I'm doing everything right. Like, what is going on? My abusive partner seems to find me everywhere I go. So a lot of times, it has to do with technology and spyware. So Cornell Tech does such an amazing job checking devices of our clients. And right now we're able to, we provide a lot of trainings. Cornell Tech provides a lot of trainings to our staff, so they're able to work with these clients remotely to help them out. And we also have another program that we are operating right now. It's computer time program. And I just mentioned how useless I am with technology. So, and for many of our clients, many of people in Queens, they don't have access to technology or anything. So it is so important right now they get access to benefits such as HRA, Human Resource Administration, this particular program helps with that. And a lot of our clients are, doing apartment searches and so forth. So our staff at the Family Justice Center is able to work with these clients remotely to make sure that they can get all this access. And clients, it's really great when someone else is able to work with these clients, especially during this scary time. And it's been really very helpful to a lot of our victims. So I want to also highlight a couple of which we are very proud of. It's and you'll get to see a little bit about the services that we have as a whole. Grab and Go book program in collaboration with Hachette Group. It is, I know many of you have been to the Family Justice Center before, and we have libraries where children could get free access to books, which has been really great. You'll see the smiles, and when we're at the center, these children who smile, they come in with so much, they're just deflated, and they face so much trauma in their lives because they just experienced brutality that just happened with their parent the night before, and they walk in and they're amazed. They're like, I can't believe I'm getting these free books. So it's really great that they can walk away. But this program right now, Sanctuary Families Children's Program provides our children's services, and they're continuing to provide therapy to our children. And one particular little girl in particular, she lost her sister, and she just recently lost her aunt to COVID. And not only that, but she just also, her father is also incarcerated. So this little girl is facing so much loss during this time. And there's a book called The Invisible String, which is an amazing, heartwarming story that reassures children that even if they can't be with their loved one, they're always in each other's heart. So our therapist was able to work with this little girl to remind her that there is an invisible string. So she's able to continue this therapy work and provide these vital services even right now. And we have another case. where we are working with this victim right now at this moment. And it kind of highlights a little bit how we're working virtual, which is, she's facing emotional, physical, and mental, verbal abuse for over 20 years. And we have Arab American Family Support Center. We have a lot of agencies because we know, as I mentioned before, we have so many cultural groups. So we have specific agencies that can work with this group. So Arab American Family Service Center was able to work with this victim while she's in the home because, one of the things that she also comes from a culture where her own family is siding with her abuser and saying, stay in the home. So this woman is really, really remarkable. She has 3 kids. She's also pregnant. And what he did was he beat her up because he wanted to abort the child, focusing on the stomach. And the same day, he brutally strangled her. Her eldest child intervened, and the abuser beat up the child. And what ended up happening, this courageous woman, along with the staff person, our case manager from Arab American Family Support Center, the DA's office, NYPD, we were able to remove him from the home, where she was able to get back in the home, and all these agencies, including Queens Legal Services, was able to provide this client with vital services, including family law consultation to help her with custody visitation, an alarm system through our partners, our Human Resource Administration, to provide her ATS, Alternative Shelter Program, and including therapy for her and her children. I remember she's such a remarkable woman, and despite all the societal pressures that she was facing, she's so resilient and so brave. And she said to us that was the first night that she slept well, her and her children, because she didn't have to be scared anymore. So it's truly, truly remarkable. And I just want to share one more client experience that we're facing with, so you can understand the collaboration and all the amazing partners at the Family Justice Center. This one client of ours, he came in and he's terrified. And one of the things is that his partner was threatening to out him to his family who's still in their home country. And he was also using his immigration status against him. And this particular client was brutally sexually assaulted for so many years and completely deflated and afraid and so forth. And our Safe Rising case manager, along with our Urban Justice Center attorney, was able to work together in close collaboration to make sure that he got a family court order of protection. We were able to get him into a domestic violence shelter because he did not want to report the incident, but we were still able to work with him to make sure that he's doing remarkably well. And I share all these stories right now. One thing that has never changed, we as staff, we're still working with clients to make sure that we're safety planning. We're finding innovative, creative ways to work with them, right? But one thing that will never change, and it is highlighted more than ever, is the client's resiliency and strength. It's incredible. And the partnerships and the collaboration at the Family Justice Center, and all of you out there as well, we would not be able to do this work without you. So I thank each and every one of you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. I know it can be challenging sometimes to hear, the stories of survivors, but I think it's really important because I think it does show, as Susan says, our clients' strength and resiliency, and also the incredible partnerships that we're really lucky and fortunate to have in Queens. As Susan mentioned, our Family Justice Centers are here for survivors. We're here in every borough. We're operating virtually, really in the same way that we were operating when our doors were opened. So I have put the number for the Queens Family Justice Center in the chat. You can also follow my office on Instagram at NYC Against Abuse, and you'll see that we are constantly updating it with resources and information. You can also find a lot of information about resources throughout the city at NYC Hope. If you just type NYC Hope, you'll be able to link up to government agencies like our partners here on the call, as well as all of the community-based organizations in the community, as well as the Family Justice Centers. So NYC Hope is a great one-stop kind of portal for survivors, or for those who are listening to this call because you want to offer help to a survivor, right? You may know somebody who you think could utilize some help in the community, and you want to be able to start that conversation. And NYC Hope offers ways to kind of be able to do that in a way that's non-judgmental and supportive. So thank you again, Susan. We really appreciate you being here this morning and sharing all of that. Our next speaker, our next expert is Maureen Curtis. Maureen Curtis is a vice president of crime justice programs, criminal justice programs at Safe Horizon. And Maureen's going to spend a bit of time this morning talking about Safe Horizon and their programs in the city, but particularly in Queens. And Maureen, we've had a few questions on the chat come in about how do I actually get and file an order of protection now? So if you could talk about that a bit and how some of the Safe Horizon programs and family justice centers can help. And a little bit about NYPD and what would happen if somebody makes a report to NYPD that a violation has happened, and possibly talking about your advocates in those precincts that could possibly help with that. That would be great. Thanks, Maureen.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just going to throw my timer on here so I don't go over. Thank you so much to Borough President Lee, DA Katz, and Commissioner Noel. I'm really excited, and everybody else on the webinar. I'm really excited to be here. So Safe Horizon is the largest victim services agency in the country, and we have programs throughout New York City. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our essential services, as well as how we're operating in the programs, particularly in the programs, or specifically in the programs in Queens to help survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So we run the New York City hotline, and that's 24 hours, 7 days a week, and that's still in operation. So as was said by several of my colleague panelists, help is out there. We are still here, advocates are still here to speak to you 24 hours, 7 days a week. Interestingly enough, and I think not surprisingly, because of the social isolation, people staying home, and when violence is occurring in the home, initially when we were asked to stay home, we saw a drop in the calls to the hotline. We're starting to see an increase in the last couple of weeks. So each week it's getting higher, which is what we anticipated, sadly, that we would start to see more calls coming into the hotline. The shelters, we operate about 50% of domestic violence shelters in New York City. They're still open, and we're still accepting individuals and families into our shelters. And we are not at capacity, as are other domestic violence shelters operated in New York City. My colleague, Margarita, operates a shelter as well. CACs, the Child Advocacy Centers. And there is a child advocacy center in every single borough. So we have one here in Queens, and this is a program that's fully interdisciplinary, where we have partners from the DA's office, Safe Horizon, police, medical providers, ACS, that provide services for children who have been sexually abused or severely physically abused. Sadly, we have seen a drop. The State Central Register has seen a drop in calls for child abuse and child neglect, which is also not surprising, because a lot of calls come when a child reports to their teacher, and with school now operating remotely, there are fewer calls. So just to echo Commissioner Noel when she talked about the upstander, so much of this is on us as community members, as family, as friends, that if we know somebody, whether it be a child or an adult that might be in a violent relationship or being potentially at risk for abuse as a child, reach out to that person, talk with that person. And then our Immigration Law Project, which also operates in Queens, they are still operating in person, because although all of the courts are now closed, meaning the buildings are closed, but they're still open for services, the immigration courts are still open. So our attorneys who work with immigrants are still going to court for their cases. And then our Street Work Project, which works with runaway homeless youth throughout New York City, including Queens, and a majority of the youth that they work with are LGBTQ teens or young adults who have, oftentimes left their home because of, when they come out, that they might have been ostracized or isolated, or there could be violence perpetrated against them. So just to talk a little bit about the courts, because I know there were some questions in. So I oversee our courts and family justice centers, and the question was asked, can you get an order, or how would you get an order of protection? So anybody can call the court. The number The courts are hearing emergency cases. Orders of protections are considered emergency cases. Our family court staff who, once again, we're in all 5 boroughs, so we have staff working in Queens. Several of the Family Justice Center staff also can help with petitioning for an order of protection. And you can call the court or call our numbers directly, and an advocate will walk you through that process, help you file that petition, and you will go in front of a judge, either over the phone or remotely, depending on what technology you have in your home, and get an order of protection that will either be mailed or emailed, depending on your preference, to your home. The sheriff's office will then serve the order on the person causing harm, and it's in effect at that moment. The police are aware. The question also came up about, are police aware of the extended orders of protection? They are aware of that. They know about that. There was meetings with high-level officials in the NYPD to talk about this court order, extending the orders, because when a police officer responds to a domestic violence incident and an order of protection is produced, the first thing they have to do is determine what happened and was the terms of the order violated. And if the order doesn't look valid because the date has expired, the immediate response of that police officer is, I cannot make an arrest because even though the terms may have been violated, it's not a valid order. Now they know that past a certain date, March 19th, the orders are still in effect. Jennifer mentioned one of the programs that we have at Safe Horizon is a program where we partner with the NYPD. It's called the Crime Victim Assistance Program. This program has advocates working in police precincts. So we're in every single Queens precinct. We have 2 advocates in every precinct, one who works with victims of domestic violence and one who works with all other victims of crime. And because of the relationship, and this is a partnership that we've had with the NYPD probably 35 years now. So we've been working with the NYPD. So that's helped us to build relationships on the ground with individual patrol officers or domestic violence police officers, but also at high level, which helps us in talking about policies or protocols, or when a individual may need some advocacy with the police officer or a police supervisor, our advocates can provide that intervention and help advocate. We call the precincts daily because right now we're working remotely. So probably about 80% of Safe Horizon programs, including the programs in Queens, are operating remotely. And what that means is that we're not going into our offices. So the court staff are not going into the courts because the courts are closed. Advocates who work in the precincts are not going to the precincts because we have to work remotely. We have community programs. We have one in Queens here. They're also working remotely. But we have set up systems so that we're getting information in the moment from our partners. So daily we're calling the precincts, and when police officers respond to a 911 call for domestic violence, they're letting us know that survivors' information, and we're doing outreach similar to what we would do if we were in the precinct. We have a relationship for many years with the Queens DA's office, and prior to us leaving our offices in the court, we would get daily a list of all survivors' information post-arraignment. So that's after the case has been heard, first time in court, charges are brought, and an order of protection is issued. Our advocates, similar to what we were doing before we left our offices, are reaching out to these survivors to talk with them about what just happened in arraignment, what an order of was an order of protection issued? If it was, what does that mean? And all of this is client-centered. We're there also to hear what is the client telling us and how can we talk with them about safety? Because safety for them could mean shelter. Safety may mean, how do I keep myself staying in the home? Because maybe I lost my job and I don't want to relocate at this point because I don't have the resources to relocate. All of this is considered when speaking with the survivor, so that we are keeping in mind and identifying options that are connected to what risks we may be hearing the survivor talk about. And I can't say enough about our work in the Family Justice Center, because the Family Justice Centers brings together not just different disciplines, but also various providers. Our work with VIP, with Womankind, with Saki, cultural-based organizations that, while we have staff that speak multiple languages and we have access to Language Line, it can be different when you don't speak, the person's language, or, you have a different, it's also understanding not just the language, but the culture. And I think that some of our clients feel more comfortable speaking with somebody who's from the same cultural background. And we work very closely with these organizations. They make referrals to us, and we will make referrals to them. And then I'm so glad that we talked about working with immigrants, because they're often the hidden survivors in this pandemic. When we think about the impact on our economy, and we think about the fear of coming forward, the fear of going to the hospital. And even though I was so glad that it was mentioned by several speakers that, we're here for you, no matter your status, no matter who you are, no matter language, all of that is really important for survivors to hear, particularly survivors in immigrant communities, because we don't want anybody to feel that they can't come forward and not receive the assistance that they need. And if I could just, in closing, just mention, just a couple of themes that I think are really important in terms of how we provide services during COVID. Collaboration. I mean, just this town hall shows all the different types of collaboration. Collaboration has always been key. I'm a big believer in coordinating responses and services. It's even more important during COVID. Being creative in how we reach out. The hotline is still operational, but some people may not be able to call the hotline. Safe Horizon has a safe chat where you can connect with somebody safely via chat, via text, if you're not safe to call somebody. We've been reaching out to essential workers that are not necessarily essential workers for survivors of domestic violence. Maybe they're, delivering food, and talking to them about what they can look out for when they're going into the home, putting up flyers in Nypd buildings so that people know that help is available, whether it's, transferring through the emergency transfer program if they're not safe to live in their apartment anymore, so that they know that all of these services are still available. I love that Commissioner Noel mentioned the Upstander program, because even more important now, it's like we have to be there for our friends, our family, our neighbors, and never underestimate how critical it can be to just say, how are you doing? Is everything okay? If you know or you suspect, even if you can't do anything else, that will go so far for that survivor, and they'll know that they can come to you, when they're ready. BP Lee mentioned when they're, they have to be ready to come to us. And that is so true. But to know that they're, because you did that, just that, how are you doing? They know they can come to you. Thinking outside of the box, safety planning is looking so much different because some survivors can't leave their home, or because of other risks are choosing not to leave their home. So what does safety planning look like? It may not be the traditional going into shelter or calling the police or getting an order of protection. It may be, how are you keeping yourself? Having a code with a family member or a friend or a neighbor, or even an advocate, where you call that advocate. We just had a really high risk case where the abuser was a retired member of the service who had guns in the home. And even though it wasn't physical violence yet, there was just the fear of that physical violence. And then also acknowledging, not just the physical risk, but all the needs. People are losing their jobs and, can't put food on their table. And that's going to impact the type of need they have, because they often, understandably so, will prioritize the risk of putting food on the table over the risk of, being in an abusive relationship. And what does that mean around safety planning for this? And then the last thing is that for all who are recognizing your own self-care and taking care of yourself, your own vicarious trauma, this is hard work pre-COVID. It's even harder work now. And if we have to first help ourselves before we can help another. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so much for providing so much detail and important information about the services Safe Horizons providing, and also just, concluding by talking about how this work is different now and how we need to be more creative and really support survivors, because we all know sheltering at home is not something that is safe for many people. And so we really appreciate you ending your remarks with that. There was one question, Maureen, about the high propensity list at NYPD. So I wondered if you could just spend like 1 minute talking about how your advocates interact with that. And then we can move on to our final speaker.
So we are calling the precincts daily, and the officers are sharing the new DIRs, the victims' information from the new reports that have come in daily, as well as the victims' information on the high propensity list. And we're working with the police officers to provide outreach to these homes and to do safety planning. A point was made earlier that officers are not doing home visits, but they are doing home visits, and I put that in quotes, on real serious cases. And that could be, like almost considered like a 911 call, where because of the risk to that person, they are making exceptions and doing a visit to that home. But minimally, outreach is being made to survivors by phone.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen. And there was a question whether you can call Safe Horizon directly. And yes, Maureen can put some numbers in the chat, or I will. Their hotline that they operate for the city is 24 hours. And the hotline can also provide connections to their family court programs that can help people file for orders of protection, as well as the numbers for CVAP advocates, I would imagine, Maureen. So yes, you can call Safe Horizon directly in many different ways. I also want to note that people should pay attention to the chat, because there's some really important information from fellow partners in the community, service providers who are wonderful. Garden of Hope, Arab American Family Support Services, and JASA have all put in their hotline numbers, which is really fantastic. And all of that information can also be found again on our domestic violence portal, NYC Hope. So I'd really encourage folks to check out that information so that you have it in a very easy to access place. So thank you so much, Maureen. At this point, we're right on time. I'm pleased about that. So thank you to all the panelists for that. We're scheduled to be with everyone today virtually until 12:30. So we'll be finishing kind of our program next with our final speaker, Margarita Guzman, who is the executive director at VIP, one of our wonderful partner agencies that provide services in the community and also on site at our family justice centers. Margarita is going to spend some time talking about the wonderful services VIP provides, how those look a bit different right now during COVID, and also talking about the unique barriers and challenges facing immigrant survivors during this time. So thank you so much for joining us today, Margarita. I hand it over to you.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you. Good afternoon, Queens. My name is Margarita Guzman, and I am the Executive Director at the Violence Intervention Program. I thank all of my fellow panelists, the Queens District Attorney, Queens Borough President, and the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence for hosting this town hall. VIP is a proud partner of the Family Justice Center in Queens, and I appreciate the leadership that Susan Jacob has demonstrated at this critical moment when Queens communities need it most. I want to tell you a little bit about VIP and who we are and who we serve. And then I want to focus on the issues that we are seeing for immigrant survivors living in Queens during the pandemic. And I'm going to end by telling you about the services we're providing during COVID. So a little bit about who we are, if you're not familiar with our organization. We're the only culturally specific organization dedicated to serving Latina, Latino, and Latinx survivors of domestic and sexual violence in New York City. We were founded in 1984 by grassroots survivors and activists, and we are deeply rooted within Latinx communities and have locations throughout New York City. And while the vast majority of the VIP clients that we serve are low-income immigrant Latina mothers and their children, we welcome anyone in need of our services, including single adults, men, trans, and gender nonconforming victims and survivors. Inclusivity is among one of our most deeply held values. And to give you a better sense of who we serve, I wanted to share a little bit of our client statistics. Last calendar year, VIP served about 1,500 survivors, plus their children. Over 93% of them were cisgender women, and over 75% of them were Latinx identified. About 2/3 of them were immigrants, predominantly from Mexico, the Dominican Republic, and Ecuador. And about 2/3 reported Spanish as their primary language. About 3/4 of them were parents, and nearly 100% of all of our clients earn below 80% of the median area income, with about 74% reporting a household annual income of less than $15,000. So that's prior to COVID. And prior to COVID, more than 51% reported that they were unemployed, 9% of whom said they were unemployed specifically because of domestic violence. And we know that those unemployment numbers have spiked in the last 2 months and will continue to worsen as we wait out stay-at-home orders and as social distancing protocols, critically important protocols, are in place. I now want to focus a little bit more on our Queens program and the issues that we have been seeing there over the last 2 months. And I would like to lift up the leadership of Michelle Cameo, who runs our Queens office, and her incredible team, who make magic happen every single day in the hardest hit neighborhoods in Queens. The VIP client statistics that I just shared with you are actually really different in our Queens program, where well over 90% of our clients are immigrants. So I'm going to focus the rest of my comments specifically on what immigrant survivors living in Queens have been reporting to us as their greatest struggles. So first and foremost, we are seeing the psychological toll that this is taking on immigrants. People who face a multidimensional crisis that goes far beyond COVID contraction and includes an economic devastation as well as increased interpersonal violence. That psychological impact has compounded after years of surviving anti-immigrant policies and increased ICE activity in their neighborhoods and work locations. And immigrants have been embattled for their survival for a very long time now. So I can't overstate the mental health implications of feeling hunted by abusive partners, abusive governments, and now to feel stalked by this deadly virus. We have received so many more referrals from other programs because survivors are triggered and anxiety is going up exponentially. Claustrophobia, fear of death, fear of how to provide for children if something were to happen to you, fear of interfacing with ICE if you have to go to the ER. All of this is contributing and compounding the trauma. So despite the overwhelming need for health and mental health care, because as we all know, Latinx communities, and especially our Queens communities, are those hardest hit by diagnosis and death related to COVID, immigrants are really struggling to get access to care. The messaging that we're hearing from our health experts is that if you're feeling COVID-like symptoms, you stay home and you call your provider and you find out from them whether you should go to the ER. It's really important advice for all of us. But if most of our clients don't have a primary healthcare provider, and so many immigrants are waiting until it's too late to take action about the symptoms they're experiencing, or they might go to the ER as a practice of first resort because they don't have a healthcare provider again, which puts them at a greater risk of COVID contractions. If they weren't sick with COVID going into the ER, they will be leaving the ER. So that has been a huge issue for immigrants, is getting access to care during this time. Food insecurity has been a huge issue. You've all seen the photos of the lines going around the block for food pantries. And while we are really grateful that the city has stepped up with programs that provide food delivery services, that has also posed some challenges, as of course it will, when the service doesn't always meet the needs of vulnerable populations. We were working with one elder diabetic client who had requested food through the city delivery service, and she received 3 days of food, an incredible resource. But unfortunately, there was no protein or fresh food involved in the delivery that she received, which included other foods that would be appropriate for other people who were not diabetic, like Cheerios and pasta. So that actually posed something of a health danger to her to be able to consume the food that she was provided. She also used a group called Invisible Hands, which is coordinated by a mutual aid group in Queens. I want to give a shout out to all the mutual aid groups doing great work at this time, coming together to help neighbors. That has really helped with food access in the communities that need it most. VIP itself had to double our food vouchers to her, recognizing that it wasn't just in addition to helping her get food and not be hungry. It was also a matter of averting a potential trip to the ER if she consumed the food that was being provided to her through other pantry means and delivery means, because it wasn't food that was right for her diabetic diet. So as you can imagine, we've seen a huge uptick in requests to VIP for the food vouchers that we provide clients. And programs like ours are quickly tapping out. We are a tiny but mighty organization, and we have a real outsized impact when you consider our size. But there's only so many resources to go around. And that has been a real challenge for all organizations like ours that are trying to get these much needed basic life needs out to our clients. And we are seeing that survivors are making decisions between food and rent, because even though there is an eviction freeze and a pause and a moratorium on anybody being thrown out of their home, an eviction freeze is not a rent cancellation. And so that crisis is being postponed, and clients are really making decisions knowing that a few months down the road, they will be facing eviction if they don't pay their rent, and making decisions about how much food they can afford while also trying to meet those other economic needs. And speaking of housing, one of the things that we know is true is that low-income immigrants are way more likely to be living in shared housing situations. Renting a room in another person's apartment is a really common practice for our clients, and very often the only way they're able to achieve private housing in a sustainable way. And many of our clients have reported that they were kicked out of shared living situations because the leaseholder was really fearful of additional exposure to their families. So it is not the building management or landlords themselves who are necessarily presenting one of the greatest threats or sources of harassment to tenants that we are serving who are also survivors of violence. And city watchdog agencies guarding against landlord abuse are not always able to help in these situations. So many of our clients have had to leave, and they either join family in even more overcrowded households, or they have had to leave the city and even the state, which is a difficult thing for immigrants right now, because New York City is just about as immigrant friendly a place as you can find. And overall, one of the interesting things for VIP is that we have seen a very steady, and in some cases, a remarkably high traffic to our hotline. So there has been an increase in the number of calls as the pandemic goes on. We have actually hit weekly all-time highs in calls to our hotline lately. And that has not necessarily been true for Queens residents. There was almost a month where we didn't receive any new referrals for Queens-based people. They're trickling in now, but not at a high rate. And we have not gotten any new clients who are living with their abusive partner. So, and we know that there is a sort of freeze frame for people who are trapped in these abusive households. And we know also, as all the other panelists have shared, that there will be a huge influx and a floodgate opening of need when stay-at-home orders start to lift and those restrictions begin to loosen. The cases that we have been seeing have been a lot more for counseling than for case management. And then also in our current clients, people who were already in connection with an increase in the need for basic needs. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing to support survivors in Queens and throughout New York City. All of our services really focus on the intersection of gender justice and immigrant rights, housing, and economic justice. We also operate a live 24/7 emergency hotline and an online chat service that is sometimes far more effective for people who are living with an abusive partner and aren't able to make a phone call during this time. We operate an emergency domestic violence shelter, which does have vacancy right now and is taking new intakes for people who need emergency shelter. We provide food, safety planning, and crisis counseling to our survivors in crisis. We provide ongoing healing and support services, such as individual counseling and empowerment-based support groups, and advocacy to connect to benefits and resources and other legal assistance. We run a transitional housing program for survivors and their children to stabilize after the trauma of domestic violence. And our economic justice programs are really focused on immigrants who may not be able to participate in traditional workforce programs. Our Artesanando initiative, which means the healing arts, helps survivors to develop their own small businesses as a supplement or even a primary income when they can't just go apply for jobs because they might not have the documentation necessary for that. And we recently launched a new business called Brightly East Harlem, which is the first ever worker cooperative, fully owned and operated by survivors of domestic and sexual violence, all of whom are Latinas and immigrants. And a little plug for them, actually, they just obtained their certification in commercial disinfection and are available for commercial jobs to help make workspaces safe from COVID. So Brightly East Harlem, and the name does not just mean that they serve East Harlem, they also serve locations in Queens, Bronx, and Brooklyn. We also provide innovative sexual violence programs that address complex sexual trauma experienced by Latinx survivors, especially those who migrated into the US because of gender-based violence in their home countries, and many of whom also experienced sexual assault on their migratory journey here. Our Yo También program, for example, is a digital storytelling counseling series that teaches participants to use multimedia tools and reclaim their narratives of sexual violence, connecting them to the power of the Me Too movement. And we operate a robust communications and outreach program that works with a team of promotoras who are survivor activists and who work within their own neighborhoods and communities to change culture that allows or even enables domestic and sexual violence. All of our services have continued during the pandemic. Some of the ways that we have shifted to help prevent the spread of COVID is to provide remote services wherever possible. We use software that is both HIPAA and VAWA compliant, VAWA being the Violence Against Women Act compliant, to preserve security and confidentiality for the survivors that we are reaching through that modality. And not only have we continued all of our programs, we are also now launching a new service to our clients. VIP has established an emergency cash assistance fund that is providing one-time cash assistance to survivors and their children. This is only being offered to our current and active clients, so referrals that are coming in right now may not be eligible for the fund because, quite frankly, it's not enough to go around and the money will run out quickly. But the emergency cash assistance program that we have is going to prioritize survivors who are ineligible for any of the safety net assistance or unemployment insurance or stimulus checks, as well as those who are homeless and unemployed due to COVID, or sick or caring for someone who is sick with COVID or COVID-like symptoms. And that fund was established through the generosity of both foundations and individual donors. So we feel that that is one of the most effective ways to respond to this compounded trauma and intersection of crises that are impacting the immigrant survivors that we work with there in Queens and throughout New York City. I thank you for this opportunity to get the word out about our services so that people surviving violence right now, or neighbors and friends who care about them, will know where to go. And as Maureen said, that they can't call right now doesn't mean that you don't get them the information, because they will have it when they need it. And our hotline number is 1-800-664-5887. 888-286-3800. I know that's going to be provided again at the end of this town hall, but we invite you to please do reach out. The hotline is open to people who are calling on behalf of others. So if you want to brainstorm and think through what you might do for somebody for whom you have concern, please also reach out to us. Think of us as a community resource. We are located in community, all of our offices, and we are absolutely here to help you respond. And for survivors who are listening to this, to respond to you, to make sure that you have what you need to survive not just the COVID crisis, but the violence that you're navigating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for providing such important information about your services and all of the unique and creative ways you're responding to survivors' needs during this very difficult time. As Margarita said, we really want to make sure anyone listening knows, and that's the overwhelming theme for this webinar, that we are here. We're here for you. We want you to call and reach out. Margarita mentioned her hotline and their chat service. Chat and text can obviously be a much safer way to engage during this time. You can find that information at the end of the webinar when we close, as well as on my office's site called NYC Hope. If you type that into the browser of your internet, you'll find all of those resources. Before I close our program today, I just want to ask if any of the panelists want to say anything else they want to respond to. Borough President Lee, I again want to thank you for your support of this webinar and your staff. They've done an amazing job supporting our technology needs, and I wanted to ask if you had anything else you wanted to share right now.
No, thank you everyone for doing this, and for all those who are watching or listening, my office is also operational. 718-286-3000. Thank you, Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Borough President Lee. I really want to just spend the last couple of minutes just again thanking each of our panelists. You are all such experts and such leaders in the community, and I feel really privileged to work with all of you. I think we do have strong partnerships. While we do have challenges that we're all going to need to work on to address, many of which Margarita just talked about, I feel confident that we can do that together, and I really appreciate all of your partnership during this time. I again want to thank our partners on this webinar, the Borough President's Office, as well as the District Attorney's Office and DA Katz. Thank her for joining us today, and thank her for commitment to this issue and developing new resources like their 24-hour hotline to make sure that survivors feel supported. And I really want to close by thanking everyone listening. You know, we had over like 200 participants today, some listening by phone and some through Zoom. And we really want to thank you for spending time with us today. You know, we all are pulled in so many directions right now, especially if you have little ones like I do, who are remote learning while you're working from home and trying to do all of this, you know, at the same time. And we thank you for spending time with us today. We hope you walk away knowing that the Queens community is really committed to this issue, to making sure that survivors know there's resources available. We want to hear from you. For those listening who want to be a source of information, I commend you. We have to remember that social distancing doesn't mean emotional distancing. You know, check in on friends. You can do that in safe ways through text or chat. You know, be an ambassador in your building. You can put up a sign, you know, about resources. We're happy to send a sign to you. You know, be an ambassador. That, you know, information is power, and the more information people have about resources in the community during this challenging time, the better off we all are. And so I really commend you for joining us today and being here with us on this very important but challenging topic. At this point, I'm going to close the webinar. We're only 5 minutes over time, so thank you again, panelists, for staying on time. I do want to mention that all of the contact information will now be seen. The Borough President's Office will be sharing that screen so you can see everyone's contact information as well as resources in the community. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here and listening to us, and we appreciate the partnership we have with all of our presenters. Thank you, and I hope everyone stays safe and well. Bye-bye.